Hello and welcome to our webinar, Spring Book Club Picks. I'm Susan McGuire, Senior Editor, Collection Management and Library Outreach at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You could also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Rachel Weiss, School and Library Manager at Penguin Young Readers, Laura Woofit, Sales and Marketing Director at Camcat Books, and Kathy Weiss, Sales and Marketing Director at Europa Editions. First, we'll hear from Rachel Weiss. Rachel is a manager in the Penguin Young Readers School and Library Marketing Department. She's run a monthly book club with fellow publishing friends for the last 7 years and loves the topic. Thanks for being here today, Rachel.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to jump right in. So the very first book I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites of the season. Seriously, I want to recommend it to everyone, teens, colleagues, friends, literally everyone. All My Rage is a multi-generational story about family history and family ties, about real friendship and true forgiveness. It is sweeping, heart-wrenching, and tender. And in #1 New York Times bestselling author Sabaa Tahir's talented hands, it is brilliant. This is the book that Sabaa Tahir has always wanted to write, with elements pulled directly from her own history and deep ties to her own Pakistani heritage. It is deeply personal and meaningful to her. It is a stunning contemporary debut, so please read it. And on the next slide, we are hosting a free virtual book club event with Sabaa on May 3rd. So if you grab your phone and scan this QR code on the screen, you'll be taken to the page to register for that event. It'll be an hour-long conversation between Sabaa and a still to be announced moderator. And we hope that you can take this conversation and use it as a model for hosting your own book club around All My Rage. The book has 6-star reviews right now, and it should be really, really fantastic. We also have a book club guide for this book, which is on the webpage that the QR code leads to. The next. So the first thing I need you to know about I Must Betray You is that it's written by Ruta Sepetys. So it's going to be good. Ruta's newest novel is set in Romania in 1989 during the communist regime of Nicolae Ceausescu. We follow 17-year-old Christian Florescu as he's being blackmailed into becoming an informer on the US diplomats his mother is the maid for. The book follows Christian over the course of a few weeks as he begins informing through to the revolution and downfall of the Ceausescu regime. This is another stunning work of historical fiction that you won't be able to put down, and you might even recognize a few characters from Ruta's last book, The Fountains of Silence. Plus, I can vouch for how great all of Ruta's books are for book clubs. I did recommend these books to my mom's neighborhood book club, and they've become the biggest Ruta fans in Southern Indiana. So we do have a book club guide for this book as well. Next. Last Night at the Telegraph Club from Melinda Lowe is the queer romance with a historical setting that's so well drawn out. I honestly think that if we were in the 50s in San Francisco, I could give you directions around Chinatown. This book is the Venn diagram intersection of three things: the queer community, and specifically lesbians, being Chinese American in this country, and what it would be like to grow up with both of those identities in the 1950s. Lily, our main character, is fascinated with space and the women who work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, like her aunt, but she is acutely aware of how, in Lily's case, her being a woman, her being Chinese American, and her being queer will affect how she is able to pursue both of those dreams. It's important to center not only contemporary fiction with broad intersectionality, but especially historical fiction, because as Melinda Lowe's author note explains, girls like Lily have always existed, but it's much more difficult to find documentation of marginalized women in history. With 7-star reviews, a Printz Honor, a National Book Award win, an Apollo Award, a Stonewall Award, and more, this is a book that people would not stop talking about last year, and there's no way they're stopping this year either. It's currently in hardcover and paperback, and you guessed it, we have a book club guide for it last night at the Telegraph Club. So next, Dream Country by Shannon Gibney is the heartbreaking story of 5 generations of young people from a single African and American family pursuing the elusive dream of freedom. Although there are 5 characters and 5 stories, the thread that binds them together is the nightmarish spiral of death and exile connecting America and Africa, and of how one determined young dreamer tries to break free and gain control of her destiny. This isn't an easy book to read, but connects readers to one family's history and is a great addition to anti-racism reading lists. I do also think that the way that this is written, the structure of the different characters and different stories really reminds me of Cloud Atlas, in case that comp is helpful. We do have a book club discussion guide for this as well. The next is Bloodwater Paint, one of my favorite books ever. This book by Joy McCullough is a novel in verse about Artemisia Gentileschi, who was a Baroque painter from the 1600s and a feminist icon who was, in fact, a real person. This imagining of Artemisia's life goes into her young adulthood, her place as a woman in Rome, and her rape by her painting tutor and subsequent trial where said tutor was convicted. It is based on one of the earliest recordings of a rape trial in history, and those recordings from the trial still exist to this day. If you haven't picked this book up yet, then please do it ASAP. This is a book that needs to be read and that I very specifically want you to talk to me about because I just love it so, so much. This also has a book club guide, which I wrote, so please check it out. Next is a little bit younger than the others that I'm speaking about today. Starfish is a middle grade novel in verse about a young fat girl who is dealing with bullies at school and at home. This story of Ellie is about learning to love herself, stand up for herself, and take up all of her space. It also delves into therapy and the complex relationships between a mother and daughter. Starfish has been awarded a Printz Honor, and I'm specifically talking about it here because of the conversations I've had with fellow adults who have found this story of a fat girl really healing and important. Though it is written for a middle grade audience, I think this is a book that is important for readers of all ages. And we have a discussion guide for this one too. Also, Becca, yes, I 100% was the person who sold Bloodwater Paint to you at PLA in 2018. I would not shut up about this book, and I continue to not be able to shut up about this book. Anyway, next up is A Phoenix First Must Burn. This is an anthology edited by Patrice Caldwell with 16 tales by best-selling and award-winning authors that explore the Black experience through fantasy, science fiction, and magic. Each of the stories are completely independent and make for great conversation starters. I also like to think of this anthology, and honestly any anthology, as a great way to have readers find a new favorite author. So my personal favorite story in this is Rebecca Roanhorse's, and it led me to start reading other books of hers. We do have a discussion guide for this anthology. And next is Lifting as We Climb, which tells the important overlooked story of Black women as a force in the suffrage movement. White women earned the right to vote in 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed, but their counterparts of color still had a long, long way to go before they were able to vote in America. This nonfiction book by Yvette Dion, the editor-in-chief of Bitch Media, tells the whole story. She draws an important historical line from abolition to suffrage to civil rights to contemporary young activists, filling in the blanks of the American suffrage story. This book was longlisted for the National Book Award and received a Coretta Scott King Book Award author honor. And we do have a book club guide for this as well. Then the next is a personal favorite of mine, as well as a favorite of Reese Witherspoon's. The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee is set post-Civil War and follows Jo, a Chinese American girl who writes a hit agony aunt column called Dear Miss Sweetie that calls out the racial and gender-based discrimination in Atlanta. This has a romance, an incredibly witty character, and it is actually kind of a great companion to Lifting as We Climb, as it does take a fictional look at the suffragette movement and how our main character, Jo, lives between two cultures. She's not white, but she's also not Black. So she is welcome in some spaces where her Black suffragette counterparts are not, but is not fully accepted by the white suffragettes either. There is, again, a discussion guide for this book. The next is Dig by A.S. King, which won the Michael L. Prince Book Award. Dig follows a group of kids who you'll eventually find to be cousins as they navigate life in their small Pennsylvania town. This book deals with white supremacy and privilege and shows that both of these things are not only hurt people of color, but are corrosive to all people, regardless of race. I do think that this is a really interesting way to discuss like generational wealth and a lot of other things, especially her Prince Award acceptance speech really has a lot to delve into and would actually be a great place to start conversations in a book club environment. This is such an ambitious novel and A.S. King pulls it off perfectly. And here's a shocker. We have a discussion guide for this book. Next, we are back to Ruta Sepetys. So The Fountains of Silence is another amazing Ruta Sepetys book, this time taking place in the 1950s in Spain during Franco's dictatorship. And this follows a group of young people as they unravel the mysteries of the stolen babies of Spain. This book felt like a bit of a departure for Ruta, but like in the best way possible. Because 1950s Spain is not as well known of a setting and time period as the events of World War II that Ruta wrote about in Between Shades of Grey and Salt of the Sea, which are the books she's most well known for, Ruta ends up doing a lot of world building to set the scene. And I think that in particular is one of my favorite parts of this book. Her writing is truly incredible. And in between each of the chapters, there are images and historical research, quotes from newspapers of the time, all sorts of pieces of her research spliced in between the fiction narrative. This does have a discussion guide as well. The next. Okay, do we have any paranormal romance fans out there, or is it just me? In The Beautiful by Renee Adia, we are transported to the 1800s in New Orleans. There are vampires in the city, and they're very sexy and alluring. There's also a serial killer on the streets. Now the question is, are they one and the same, or is there more going on? At once a sultry romance and a decadent, thrilling mystery, master storyteller Renee Atia embarks on her most potent fantasy series yet. This is the first book in this 4-book series, with the second and third currently out now, and the fourth is coming next year. And this actually is a shocker. We don't have a discussion guide for this one. It'll be only one of 2 that I'll talk about that doesn't have a guide. Next. So I don't think I need to introduce Amanda Gorman anymore, but I'm going to anyway. Amanda Gorman launched into stardom after reading the poem The Hill We Climb at the Biden-Harris presidential inauguration. Since then, she's published 3 books in 1 year, and this is her most recent. Call Us What We Carry is a luminous poetry collection which captures a shipwrecked moment in time and transforms it into a lyric of hope and healing. In it, Amanda explores history, language, identity, and erasure through an imaginative and intimate collage. We do have a discussion guide and a poet study guide for Amanda Gorman available. And then finally, the last book that I'm going to be speaking about is one that's not out yet. Man o' War by Corey McCarthy is an achingly honest and hilarious novel about an Arab American trans swimmer fighting to keep their head above water in a landlocked Midwestern town. I'm just going to share this review of the book by Prinze-winning author A.S. King because I think she says it best. River is the most emotionally engaging character I've read in a long time, and this novel is a deep and comprehensive exploration of the journey transgender people trek through the confining world they're born into. Eye-opening, heartfelt, and real, with a massive payoff of true love. And that is all for me. So on to the next person.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. And we are now going to hear from Laura Woofit. Let me give us a second to get caught up with the slides. Well, let me read while we get caught up. Laura is the Sales and Marketing Director at CamCat. She holds an MFA in Creative Writing Fiction from Eastern Kentucky University and has been in publishing for over 5 years in various roles. She lives in Cincinnati with her husband and 2 rescue dogs. So as soon as we've got the slides up, you can take it away, Laura.
Thank you, Booklist, for having me, and I'm so excited to share our book club picks with you. So while the slides catch up, I'll go ahead and start reading about our first title, Thunder Road. Thunder Road is a noir mystery, but it also has a speculative twist to it, which makes it a really fun cross-genre title. So here's a little bit about the book. In this gamble, more than a few poker chips are at stake. When an Army Air Force major vanishes from his top secret job at the Fort Worth Air Base in the summer of 1947, down on his luck former ranger Jefferson Sharp is hired to find him because the major owes a sizable gambling debt to a local mobster. The search takes Sharp from the hideaway poker rooms of Fort Worth's Thunder Road to the barren ranch lands of New Mexico, to secret facilities under construction in the Nevada desert. Lethal operatives and an opaque military bureaucracy stand in his way, but when he finds an otherworldly clue, Sharp begins to connect the dots, and those dots draw a straight line to a conspiracy aiming to cover up a secret that is out of this world, literally so. So this book is great for fans of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code series, and a number of other ones listed there. So a little bit more about what set up this book. Colin Holmes is the author. And the Fort Worth, Dallas area is his adopted hometown. Most locals in the Dallas-Fort Worth area know Highway 199 as the Jacksboro Highway, but few remember its infamy as Thunder Road, where car bombs, gang hits, gunfights, knives, and old-fashioned beatings were a common occurrence. While the characters and situations in the book are entirely fictional, the book's setting in the summer of 1947 and the series of seemingly unrelated events that occurred were very real. Bugsy Siegel was murdered in Beverly Hills. President Truman ordered the Air Force to be separated from the Army and created a new agency he called Central Intelligence. That new Air Force quietly reopened an abandoned base near Las Vegas to test atomic bombs. However, as that summer of 47 began, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico, and the Fort Worth Air Base was where the crash debris was taken first. After researching the local history, Holmes wondered, what if all of these things were connected? And that's where the story came from. So next slide, our next title is Fool Her Once by Joanna Elm. This is a domestic thriller with a very intriguing premise. Joanna was a tabloid reporter for a number of years. And after the Undoing TV show, which was also based on a novel, she sought to answer the question of basically nature versus nurture. Is there such a thing as a psychopath gene? So let me read a little about this book. Some killers are born, others are made. As the rookie tabloid reporter, Jenna Sinclair outed Denny Dennison, the illegitimate son of a serial killer. Running from the fallout, Jenna escapes the city and hides behind her marriage and motherhood. Now, decades later, betrayed by her husband, Jenna decides to resurrect her career. When her former lover is brutally assaulted, Jenna fears that Denny has inherited his father's psychopath gene and is out for revenge. When no one believes her, she must track him down before he harms his next target, her daughter. From New York City to the remote North Fork of Long Island and the murky waters surrounding it, Jenna rushes to uncover a terrible truth. Will her investigation save or destroy her family? So this will be an awesome thriller, especially for book club discussions. Just the main premise of it, I think, will provide hours of discussion. So this is a great read to pick up. And on the next slide, for The Wayward Assassin by Susan Willett. This is the second book in the Wayward series. It's the first book, The Wayward Spy, has been greatly reviewed as recently on Mystery Scene Magazine's top 12 list. And this book comes out next week. And I'll read a little bit about this one. They underestimated her once. Now they face the consequences. Although told to stand down now that the Chechen rebel who killed her fiance is dead, CIA analyst Maggie Jenkins believes otherwise and goes rogue to track down the assassin. Soon, it becomes clear that failure to find Zara will have repercussions far beyond the personal, as Maggie uncovers plans for a horrific attack on innocent Americans. Zara is the new face of terrorism, someone who doesn't fit the profile, who can slip undetected from attack to attack, and who's intent on pursuing a personal vendetta at any cost. Chasing Zara from Russia to the war-torn streets of Chechnya and to London, and finally to the suburbs of Washington, D.C., Maggie risks her life to stop a deadly plot. And for the Wayward series, it follows intelligence analyst Maggie Jenkins on a perilous mission from Russia to England to the US to defuse a new terrorist threat. So Susan Willett is a very fascinating author. She's worked on Capitol Hill as a professional staff member for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. There she participated in several overseas staff and congressional delegations focused on intelligence cooperation with allies and classified operations against adversaries. It was there during quiet moments in the attack in the attic of the US Capitol building that Willett conceived of Maggie Jenkins, an intrepid young woman thrust into a dangerous world born of tragedy. And this book will be good for readers of the Jack Ryan series. It was a passion of Susan's because of being an intelligence analyst to have her main character be female and someone who's thrust into having to make courageous decisions on her own, even if they aren't popular ones. Even though she's not had any field experience, which is similar to the Jack Ryan's series, she is thrust into the spy game, and it's a very thrilling read. And the next slide. This is Death Warrant by Brian Johnston. This is a staff favorite and one we're really excited about coming out. Did you know that death makes great TV? And for those of us who love reality TV in any form, it wouldn't surprise us maybe in the near future to have a reality TV show where people are assassinated on live television. So let me read a little about this book. Frankie Percival is cashing in her chips. To save her brother from financial ruin, Frankie, a single stage performer and mentalist who never made it big, agrees to be assassinated on the most popular television show on the planet, Death Warrant. Once she signs her life away, her memories wiped clean of the agreement, leaving her with no idea she will soon be killed spectacularly for global entertainment. After years of working in low-rent theaters, Frankie prepares for the biggest performance of her life as her death warrant assassin closes in on her. Every person she encounters could be her killer. Every day could be her last. She could be a star if only she lives that long. So this book is so exciting. It's kind of that slow burn thriller where you read Frankie's point of view as she's going about her life and setting up her stage performances as a mentalist. And every person she encounters, you are left with subtle hints that maybe those people who act as her friend or her new boyfriend or a new client could be working for the TV show. So it's a great read that you should definitely pick up. It comes out in May. The next book on the list is Bewitching a Highlander by Roma Corden. This is her debut novel, and this is a fantasy romance set in 18th century Scotland. So let me read a little about this book. Brina McRae, a healer from Skye, with a touch of witchery in her blood, embarks on a dangerous search for her missing father. She arrives on the Isle of Coal, seat of the vile Campbells. There she encounters the debonair future chief to the Dunbar clan, Egan. Egan Dunbar is on Coal to keep the peace between the feuding Campbells and Dunbars. But when he catches Brina in a lie, he agrees to help her find her father to pay back an old debt and get to the bottom of the secret she's hiding. Is Egan willing to betray his clan for love? Can Brina trust him with her family secret and put those she loves at risk? So as you might have seen on some websites, or maybe you're a fan yourself, but we know the most latest season of Outlander is out now. So any readers who are looking for something along those lines, this would be a good one to pick up. It comes out in June. As we know that people will be hankering for more Scottish romance once the season ends. And we really loved as a staff the way that witchery, as it's called in the book, is portrayed. It's very natural and of the earth. So Brina, when she is practicing her witchcraft, she is relying on touch with stones. And it's such a fun romance read that I think many will enjoy. And the last one I have for you is called The Beach Ones by Colleen M. Story. Colleen spent a lot of time writing this novel based on her own family history. This book touches on suicide and the effects of family relationships and mental health. And Colleen had a family member who committed suicide. And so while writing this book, she had a lot of conversations with her mom about this topic and kind of working through herself how that affected her growing up. So let me read a little about this book. Daniel and his younger brother grew up in an abusive home, but Daniel was the only one who escaped. Now an established stunt rider, he tends to go back to rescue his brother, but then one jump goes horribly wrong. When he wakes up from a nightmare in Iowa, unscathed, with no memory of how he got there, his life falls apart. His team moves on without him. His best friend won't answer his calls. Even his girlfriend is hiding something. All Daniel knows is that he must pick up his brother in San Francisco in 5 days. From the isolating fields of Iowa to the crowded streets of San Francisco, Daniel must fight his way through a fog of disjointed memories and supernatural encounters to pay a debt he didn't know he owed. So we think this book will be great for discussion just about mental health, domestic abuse that Daniel and his brother were on the receiving end of growing up, and suicide in general, as for many, it can be cathartic to discuss. And Colleen is also a very successful writer, talking to writers and other authors who are aspiring authors. And so this has kind of a literary bent as well, even though it's a paranormal fantasy read. So those who enjoy The Ocean at the End of the Lane, The Gargoyle, or even redemptive stories like The Secrets of Lost Stones will enjoy this book. And this is where you can find me. So we have our newsletter sign up there, and you can also contact me if you'd like PDF downloads, book club discussions. And I've turned my camera back on, but in all of our books, we have book club questions at the end. So this will be available as well. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Laura. Our final presenter will be Kathy Weiss. Kathy is Director of Sales and Marketing at Europa Editions. She has enjoyed working in many different areas of the publishing industry, including trade and academic publishing, wholesale, distribution, and online retail. She began her career at Random House in their sales and marketing department. Among her various roles, she has held executive positions at Ingram Content Group and the Book Depository, now a part of Amazon. Take it away, Kathy.
Hi, everyone. I'm gonna shut my video off and just let you look at the PowerPoint. Before I talk about my first title, I want to say a few words about Europa Editions. For those of you who might not be familiar with Europa Editions, we are an independent publisher of literary fiction, mysteries, nonfiction, and more recently, YA and middle grade fiction. Europa is best known as a leader in translated literature. We publish authors from more than 30 countries, including the New York Times bestselling authors, Elena Ferrante and Muriel Barbary. And we are the proud publishers of the most recent Booker Prize winner, Damien Galli, of whom I will be speaking more about later in this presentation. Okay, so first up is All the Lovers in the Night. We will be publishing Mieko Kawakami's third title, All of the Lovers of the Night, in May. Mieko Kawakami is a rising literary star, so before I tell you more about her new book, I want to say a few words about her previous titles. We published her first book, Breasts and Eggs, in 2020 to great critical acclaim. It was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, and it was selected as a Best Book of the Year by Time Magazine, The Atlantic, among others. One of her early champions was Haruki Murakami, who has called her Japan's most important contemporary novelist. And then in 2021, we published Heaven. It received starred reviews in Booklist, Kirkus, and Publishers Weekly. It is a very powerful story about teen bullying. NPR said it is raw, painful, and tender, reminiscent of Elena Ferrante's fiction. We are already receiving great pre-pub reviews for her new novel. As you can see from this slide, Oprah Daly has called it her most accomplished novel yet. And Katie Kitamura has picked it as one of the most anticipated books of 2022. The protagonist is a freelance copy editor in her mid-30s. She works and lives alone and has little regular contact with anyone but her editor. Having just lived through 2 years of COVID, a lot of people can relate to this type of isolation. She decides she wants to change her life. However, she starts this journey, painful memories from her past surface. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and emotions, she becomes increasingly reliant on alcohol. Things start to spiral out of control and threaten to ruin a new romantic relationship, as well as her overall sanity. Mieko writes with keen psychological insight, and as Katie Kitamura says, her prose is instantly recognizable. We just found out yesterday that All the Lovers in the Night has been selected for Indie Next. And I also want to mention, if you received the B&T ARC library mailing, we included an ARC of this title in the February mailing. Next up is 3 by Valerie Perrin. 3 is a masterfully crafted and suspenseful story about the ties between friends and the choices which make us who we are. With this author, I also need to say a few words about her previous book before I tell you about her new book. We published her debut novel, Freshwater for Flowers, in hardcover in 2020, and it became an immediate bookseller favorite. It was selected by the ABA as an Indies Introduce and an Entries Next selection. The paperback was published in 2021, and it was selected for the Summer 21 Indie Next list for reading groups. Sarah Hardin, the CEO of Hello Sunshine, Reese Witherspoon's book club, said of Freshwater for Flowers, "I haven't read a more beautifully written book for a long time. And as you will see on this slide, Matt Haig, author of Midnight Library, called it a beautiful, intensely atmospheric, bittersweet dream of a book. It became an international bestseller, and it has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide. Now on to her new novel. Valerie is a masterful storyteller, and in Three, she weaves the story of three friends over a course of 30 years. The three meet in school at the age of 10 and remain inseparable friends through high school. After graduation, they plan to move to the city, get an apartment together, and pursue their love of music. But a tragic accident changes everything. As with Freshwater for Flowers, Valerie incorporates many storylines and plot twists, including the mystery surrounding a car, which is pulled up from the bottom of a lake in their hometown with a body inside, and how that car is connected to their story. Three is a book about the simple delight in first friendships and the awkwardness of adolescence. It's about making forever plans. It's about good and bad choices and those decisions you didn't even realize you were making at the time. Mostly it's about love and loss and coming home again. It is a page turner until the very end. Next is Belle Green. Belle Green is historical fiction at its best, a thoroughly researched book on a fascinating woman told by a writer who brilliantly brings her subject and the times she lived into life. Belle Green was J.P. Morgan's librarian and the first director of the Pierpont Morgan Library. She became one of the most powerful women in books, art, and history in the 20th century, all while keeping her true identity a secret and passing for white. Belle, her mother, and her 4 siblings renounced their past and severed their relationship with their extended family so they could have opportunities which would otherwise not be open to them. However, they lived in constant fear of being found out. Belle and her siblings also made a pact never to have children because they could not be sure of their skin color. This pact was broken by one member of the family, and it led to tragic, deadly consequences. The fact that Belle was able to hide her true identity is all the more incredible considering her father was the first Black man to graduate from Harvard, a prominent Black activist, and a US diplomat. Alexandra Lapierre is an award-winning novelist and biographer, and she merges both perfectly in the telling of this story. The book is thoroughly researched and has an extensive bibliography at the end, as well as a 16-page photo insert. And I've got a couple of slides showing some of the photos, and then you can go to the next slide. The photos in the insert, there's photos of Belle, the men in her life, including her father, romantic partners, and J.P. Morgan, as well as the Morgan Library. Next slide. There was a novel published last year about Belle Green, which sold very well. However, she still remains a relatively unknown figure, and there is room for many more readers to learn about this fascinating woman. Also, this book provides much greater historical detail on Belle, her family, and the times in which she lived. The next title is The Dolphin House, and The Dolphin House is based on an incredible true story of a young woman who becomes involved in a NASA experiment in the 1960s to teach dolphins to talk. During the 1960s, as the US and Russia engaged in the space race, NASA started to explore how we would communicate with extraterrestrials if we encountered them. This led to the decision to pursue interspecies communication on Earth, and that led to the Dolphin House experiments. Cora, a young hearing impaired woman with no scientific training, happens to meet the team of scientists working with the dolphins in St. Thomas. And after showing an incredible aptitude for connecting with them, is hired to teach them to talk. Cora requests to have a house partially submerged in water so she can live and work with the dolphins 24/7. And I have to tell you, the descriptions of her living in the house with the dolphins are utterly fascinating. She forges a remarkable bond with the dolphins, but then needs to fight to save them as a terrible scandal threatens them and the experiment. I won't give any spoilers, but the media is going to expose something about Cora, which really is very scandalous. As you will see from this slide, The Dolphin House has received a starred review from Kirkus. It has also received a pre-pub review from Booklist, which said, readers will enjoy this novel of the human need for connection, conversation, and community. I just want to quickly show her backlist. Fans of 3 Weeks of December will be excited by Audrey's return to the animal kingdom. 3 Weeks in December, which follows a group of scientists studying gorillas in Rwanda, was praised by Library Journal as a beautiful novel deserving wide readership. Europa Editions also published her novel Theory of Bastards, which received a starred review from Publishers Weekly. There have been numerous articles written about this experiment, and in 2014, there was a documentary, The Girl Who Talked to Dolphins, with footage of the real people and dolphins behind the story. The documentary also includes footage of people connected to the story, such as Carl Sagan and Jeff Bridges. And you will need to read the book to find out how Timothy Leary is connected to the story too. The last title I want to talk about is The Promise. We are very proud to be the publisher of Damon Galgut, who won the 2021 Booker Prize for The Promise. We published the hardcover in April 2021, and the paperback will be publishing this March 15th. Damon is an extraordinary writer from South Africa who had 2 previous books shortlisted for the Booker Prize, one of which, In a Strange Room, was published by Europa Editions and remains on our backlist. In addition to winning the Booker Prize, The Promise was a New York Times editor's choice. The Promise received starred reviews in Booklist, Kirkus, and Publishers Weekly. Booklist said, Galgut's compelling new novel blends characters and history and intricate themes to reveal the devastating impacts of white privilege and institutional racism. The Promise is timely, relevant, and significant. The Promise also received rave reviews in national media, where he was compared to Woolf, Joyce, and Faulkner, among others. On this slide, I've included excerpts of just a couple of the rave reviews, one from Harper's Magazine and another from The New Yorker. The Promise, which takes place in South Africa, is a family saga written in gorgeous prose. On her deathbed, Rachel Swart makes a promise to the family's black maid. This promise will divide the family, especially her children, Anton, the golden boy, Astrid, whose beauty is her power, and the youngest, Amor, whose life is shaped by feelings of guilt. Reunited by 4 funerals over 30 years, the dwindling Swart family remains haunted by the unmet promise, just as their country is haunted by its own failures. Galgut's singular talent for narrative carries the reader between characters, seamlessly blending voices and perspectives. The Promise is an epic drama that unfurls against the unrelenting march of history, sure to leave the readers transformed. I can't do full justice to this book in my presentation, so to quote Claire Massoud in Harper's Magazine, simply, you must read it. In closing, I just want to mention a few things. There are print and ebook editions for all of our titles. We also have an audiobook program. We've already published the audiobook of The Promise, and we will have audiobooks for Belle Green and The Dolphin House. Reading group guides are available for all of the titles presented today. They're available for download on our website. Our galleys are available on Edelweiss and NetGalley. For more information on Europa Editions, please visit our website. I've given you my email address in this slide, and you are welcome to reach out to me with any questions, comments, or requests. And, please sign up for our newsletter and, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and a big thank you to all of today's wonderful panelists. So tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones, like those you see here. Not yet a subscriber? Pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of the special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription, Booklist Reader, Booklist's new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To learn how you can share the latest issue with your patrons, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. Headed to PLA? Be sure to join us for our book buzz, highlighting some of the best upcoming books for adult readers, with special mention of great book group picks. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsors, Penguin Young Readers, CamCat Books, and Europa Editions. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.